Udova, March 1944, 11:47 p.m. While military brass dismissed Sergeant William Hartley's T-can explosive as amateur nonsense and dangerous improvisation, German concrete fortifications along the Channel continued swallowing British lives at a rate of 43 men per week. The official demolition charges required 200 pounds of TNT and 30 minutes of placement. Time soldiers didn't have under machine gun fire. But Hartley's banned device needed only 12 pounds, 30 seconds, and one steady hand. When a bunker complex at Calais threatened to collapse the entire D-Day landing schedule, commanders faced an impossible choice: follow regulations and watch the invasion fail, or trust a disgraced engineer whose weapon was built from Typhoon T-tins and farmers' fertilizer. Royal Engineers Depot, Chatham, Kent, February 12th, 1944. 0600 hours. The morning air stank of cordite and failure. Sergeant William Hartley stood outside the briefing hut, watching medics carry another shrouded body from the transport lorry. 22 years old, face he'd never see, name he'd never know. The 43rd casualty in 6 weeks. The mathematics were brutal and unyielding. German coastal fortifications, Regelbau 677 bunkers, constructed from reinforced concrete 18 inches thick, had transformed the Channel coast into an impenetrable fortress. British doctrine required demolition teams to place 200-pound explosive charges directly against bunker walls, a process requiring 30 minutes of exposed positioning under direct fire. German machine gunners needed roughly 45 seconds to traverse and acquire targets. The arithmetic was written in blood. 43 men dead, attempting what engineering manuals insisted was the only viable approach. Inside the briefing room, Major Edmund Whitmore's voice carried through canvas walls with clipped public school precision. The Calais complex represents our primary obstacle. Intelligence confirms 8 interconnected bunkers covering the landing beaches. Without neutralization, Operation Overlord faces complete tactical failure. Casualty projections suggest 3,000 men lost in the first wave alone. Hartley had heard variations of this speech 17 times. The answer was always identical: more men, more explosives, more blood soaking into French soil. He'd submitted his alternative design 3 months earlier, a shaped charge device constructed from readily available materials weighing 12 pounds, deployable in 30 seconds. The response had been immediate and devastating. "Sergeant Hartley," Colonel Pemberton had announced during the December review board, "this tribunal finds your explosive device unsafe, untested, and fundamentally contrary to established demolition protocols. You are hereby ordered to cease all unauthorized experimentation. Continued violation will result in court-martial." The T-cans had been the final insult. Hartley's device used empty Typhoon tins as structural casings, cheap, available, and dimensionally perfect for shape charge formation. The review board had erupted in derisive laughter. "You want us to defeat Hitler with T-tins?" Pemberton had asked, voice dripping contempt. "Perhaps we should throw scones at them as well." But Hartley understood something the brass didn't. Conventional explosives wasted 90% of their energy in omnidirectional blast. His design focused force into a single penetrating jet through Monroe effect principles, concentrating explosive power with devastating precision. The T-cans weren't comedy. They were engineering brilliance wrapped in working-class practicality. He was 28 years old, born in Manchester's industrial Ancoats district, where his father had operated a machine shop. University was impossible on a docker's wages, but Hartley had educated himself through technical manuals borrowed from the Mechanics' Institute Library, studying metallurgy and explosive chemistry by candlelight after 12-hour shifts at the Crossley Motors factory. When war came, he'd enlisted immediately, his practical engineering knowledge quickly elevating him to demolitions specialist. The problem consumed him. Every night, he returned to the abandoned workshop behind the depot's motor pool, using his off-duty hours to refine the design. The core principle was elegant, a copper cone inserted into the tea-tin casing, backed by a precise mixture of ammonium nitrate fertilizer and fuel oil. Upon detonation, the cone collapsed inward, forming a superplastic jet capable of penetrating concrete at velocities exceeding 8,000 meters per second. Materials were scavenged from civilian sources. Taifu tea tins from the depot kitchen's rubbish bins, copper sheeting from damaged electrical wiring, ammonium nitrate from farmers' fertilizer, readily available despite rationing. The design was deliberately simple. Soldiers could manufacture the device in field conditions with minimal tools. Testing happened in secret during moonless nights at the disused quarry 3 miles from base. Hartley dragged concrete blocks from bombed buildings, positioning them as targets. The first successful test occurred on January 18th. The shaped charge punched through 16 inches of reinforced concrete, leaving a perfectly circular penetration hole. The conventional 200-pound charge would have shattered the same block into rubble, impressive visually, but tactically inefficient. Hartley's device created surgical precision, a focused wound that would decompress bunker interiors, rendering them uninhabitable. But precision didn't matter to officers trained in conventional warfare. His design violated established doctrine, threatened procurement contracts with established munitions manufacturers, and worst of all, had been invented by a working-class Mancunian with no university credentials. The class divide was unspoken but absolute. Officers from Sandhurst viewed innovation from enlisted ranks with instinctive suspicion. Private Thomas Beckett, a 17-year-old Londoner with still healing shrapnel scars, found Hartley outside the briefing hut. "They're sending us again, Sergeant." Same approach, same bloody result. Hartley stared at the transport lorry, watching medics load the latest casualty. The boy's hands were visible beneath the shroud, still clutching a photograph. Somewhere in Britain, a mother would receive a telegram written in bureaucratic euphemisms, her son's death justified by adherence to proper procedure. "How many more, Sarge?" Beckett's voice cracked. "How many more before someone listens?" The question hung in the cold morning air. Hartley pulled his service jacket tighter, feeling the weight of the band design drawings folded inside the inner pocket. 43 men dead. D-Day scheduled for late spring. The invasion's success dependent on breaking bunkers that current methods couldn't touch. The answer was forming, terrible and necessary. If official channels refused to act, other methods remained. The workshop behind the motor pool contained everything needed. Materials were available. The design was proven. Only authorization was missing, and authorization could be circumvented. "One more night," Hartley said quietly. "Give me one more night." Motor Pool Workshop, Royal Engineers Depot. February 14th, 2300 hours. Rain hammered the corrugated tin roof, providing acoustic cover for activities that would guarantee immediate court-martial. Hartley worked by shielded electric torch, hands moving with machinist's precision, despite fatigue that made his vision blur. The workshop smelled of motor oil, metal filings, and the sharp chemical tang of ammonium nitrate. He'd requisitioned the fertilizer through official channels, claiming need for depot garden maintenance, a fiction that wouldn't withstand serious investigation, but might provide temporary cover. The copper sheeting came from salvaged electrical components, painstakingly cut and formed into precise cone shapes using improvised dies. Manufacturing conditions were brutal. The workshop was unheated, February cold seeping through walls until his fingers cramped around tools. Electrical power was rationed, lights restricted to 2 hours nightly, forcing him to work in semi-darkness, checking measurements by touch. Materials were inconsistent. Fertilizer purity varied between batches, copper thickness fluctuated, tea tins showed dimensional variations requiring individual adjustment. Private Beckett assisted, maintaining watch for patrol rounds while measuring explosive components with chemist's care. 15 pounds, 2 ounces, Sarge. That's the 4th batch today. Hartley nodded, mixing the ammonium nitrate with fuel oil in careful ratios. The chemistry was finicky, too much fuel, and the mixture wouldn't detonate properly. Too little and explosive velocity decreased. Optimal ratio was 94.6, measured by weight, mixed in small batches to prevent accidental detonation. The work was grinding. Cut copper, form cones, measure explosives, pack T-tins, crimp lids, install detonators. Each device required 90 minutes of concentrated labor. His production target was ambitious, 24 charges in 3 nights, enough to equip a full demolition squad. Progress was interrupted constantly by practical difficulties that military manuals never mentioned. A batch of copper proved too brittle, fracturing during cone formation. 4 hours wasted. The electric torch batteries died, forcing him to continue by memory in pitch darkness. His hands developed blisters that broke and bled, making precision work agonizing. Twice, patrol rounds passed close enough that he had to freeze mid-assembly, barely breathing, praying the sentries wouldn't investigate unusual noises from the supposedly closed workshop. The pressure of discovery was constant and suffocating. Court-martial for unauthorized explosive manufacture meant minimum 10 years in military prison. But beyond personal consequences, failure meant more body bags arriving at dawn, more telegrams delivered to grieving families, more soldiers dying attempting impossible tasks with inadequate tools. On the second night, Corporal James Whitmore arrived, the Major's younger brother, a demolitions expert who'd seen firsthand the futility of conventional approaches. He entered without announcement, standing silently in the doorway, while Hartley's hands froze over a half-assembled charge. "I didn't see anything," Whitmore said finally. "But if I had seen something, I'd mention that the Calais complex assault is scheduled for February 28th, and I'd mention that Major Whitmore is desperate enough to consider irregular solutions." The implication was clear. Official channels remained closed, but unofficial tolerance existed. Hartley resumed work, Whitmore joining the assembly line, his officers' training yielding to practical necessity. By the third night, Hartley was operating on 18 hours without sleep, sustained by endless cups of strong tea and the grim determination that characterized his Mancunian upbringing. Manchester had built its prosperity through industrial innovation. Spinning jennies, steam engines, railway locomotives, all invented by practical men who solved problems through hands-on engineering rather than academic theory. That heritage ran through his blood. The work took on meditative rhythm: measure, mix, pack, seal. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory compensating for exhaustion. The workshop became a kind of chapel, sacred purpose, transforming mundane materials into instruments of salvation. Private Beckett maintained the count. 22 completed, Sarge. 2 more to target. Dawn was approaching, visible as grey light seeping through wall gaps. Hartley's hands shook with fatigue as he crimped the final T-tin lid, installing the electrical detonator with agonizing care. The device looked absurd. A Taifu tea container, cheerful red label still visible, now containing 12 pounds of precisely engineered death. 24, he announced, voice hoarse. Enough for full squad deployment. The charges sat in wooden crates, innocuous and deadly. They represented violation of direct orders, potential court-martial, and quite possibly the difference between D-Day's success and catastrophic failure. Corporal Whitmore checked his watch. 4 hours until morning parade. I suggest these find their way to the demolition stores, with proper paperwork mysteriously appearing to cover their presence. And if questions arise, Hartley asked, then we'll face consequences together, Whitmore replied. But first, let's see if these bloody things actually work. German fortification complex, Calais coast, February 28th, 03:45 hours. The Channel wind cut like razor wire, carrying salt spray and the distant rumble of German generators. Lieutenant Peter Ashford lay in frozen mud 60 yards from Regelbau 677B, studying the bunker through night vision binoculars, while trying to ignore the fact that 3 previous assault attempts had ended with entire squads annihilated. The bunker was a concrete nightmare. 18-inch reinforced walls, steel-reinforced firing ports, interlocking fields of fire covering every approach angle. Intelligence photos showed 8 interconnected structures forming a defensive complex that dominated 2 miles of coastline. Conventional assault was suicide. Conventional demolitions required 30 minutes of exposed positioning. German machine gunners needed 45 seconds. Beside him, Sergeant Hartley unpacked the T-10 charges with ritualistic care. 24 devices, each weighing 12 pounds, each representing career-ending insubordination if tonight failed. "You're certain about this?" Ashford whispered. The lieutenant was 23, public school educated, commissioned 9 months earlier. His first combat operation had ended with 18 men dead. The memory haunted him nightly. "No," Hartley admitted, Manchester accent thick in the darkness. "But I'm certain the conventional approach kills everyone. This might just kill only some of us." The assault plan was unconventional to the point of madness. 2-man teams would approach under darkness, place charges directly against bunker walls, retreat to safe distance, detonate simultaneously. Total exposure time, 90 seconds. Conventional doctrine required 30 minutes. The time compression was everything. German sentries patrolled with mechanical precision, searchlights sweeping approach zones every 40 seconds. The timing was suicidal but workable. Barely. Hartley had calculated approach vectors during sleepless nights, identifying 12-second windows when searchlight coverage created temporary blind spots. "First team, move," Ashford ordered. Hartley and Private Beckett crawled forward, dragging charges through mud and barbed wire. The concrete bunker loomed ahead, dark and massive, firing ports like dead eyes. Machine gun barrels tracked overhead, German gunners waiting for targets. Time compressed into heartbeat seconds. Crawl 3 yards. Freeze as searchlight swept past. Crawl again. The T-10 charge felt absurdly light in Hartley's hands. Years of engineering compressed into 12 pounds of improvisation. If the shaped charge failed, if the copper cone didn't form properly, if the explosive mixture was incorrect, if detonation occurred prematurely, they'd die having accomplished nothing. They reached the bunker wall, concrete cold and unyielding against Hartley's palm. 30 seconds remained before the next searchlight sweep. He positioned the charge at wall base, attaching magnetic clamps, inserting the electrical detonator with shaking hands. "Set," he whispered into the radio. 7 other teams reported simultaneously. 8 charges positioned, 8 T-10 bombs that military brass had dismissed as amateur nonsense, now pressed against concrete that had withstood 3 months of conventional assault. "Withdraw," Ashford ordered. "Detonation in 60 seconds. Hartley and Beckett scrambled backward, diving into the drainage ditch that provided defilade cover. The other teams converged, gasping, mud-soaked, alive against improbable odds. Hartley clutched the detonation controller, thumb resting on the firing button. 43 British soldiers had died, attempting this exact mission with conventional tools. His hands trembled with fatigue, cold, and the weight of responsibility that no 28-year-old working-class engineer should bear. 5 seconds, Ashford counted. 4, 3, 2. Hartley pressed the button. The night exploded with white-hot fury. 8 shaped charges detonated simultaneously, copper cones collapsing into superplastic jets that punched through concrete with surgical violence. The effect was unlike conventional explosions. No massive blast wave, no spectacular fireball, just focused penetration, creating catastrophic pressure differentials. The bunker's interior decompressed violently. German soldiers inside experienced instantaneous atmospheric shock. Pressure waves that ruptured organs, shattered equipment, rendered the fortification uninhabitable in microseconds. The structure remained visually intact, concrete walls showing only small entry holes, but the interior was devastated. German survivors staggered from secondary exits, disoriented and defeated. The interconnected complex, designed to withstand sustained artillery bombardment, had been neutralized by T-10s and fertilizer. Ashford stared through binoculars, voice hushed with disbelief. It worked. Dear God, it actually worked. The implications were staggering. German defensive planning was built on concrete's presumed invulnerability. Regelbau bunkers represented millions of Reichsmarks and months of engineering, all defeated by improvised charges costing less than £5 each. The psychological impact would be devastating. If T-10s could penetrate Atlantic Wall fortifications, nothing was safe. German radio traffic erupted in panicked confusion. Hartley, who spoke rudimentary German, caught fragments. Penetration. Impossible. How? New weapon. London. Secret. The enemy knew something fundamental had changed, but couldn't comprehend the mechanism. Back at depot headquarters, Major Whitmore received the field report with trembling hands. 8 bunkers neutralized. 0 British casualties. Tactical objective achieved 96 hours ahead of schedule. The Calais complex, which threatened to derail D-Day entirely, was now operationally destroyed. Colonel Pemberton, the same officer who'd banned Hartley's device as amateur nonsense, stood in the communications room, face white with the realization that his institutional rigidity had nearly cost the invasion. "Bring Sergeant Hartley to my office," he ordered quietly. Immediately. Royal Engineers Headquarters, London, June 12, 1944, 1100 hours. 6 days after D-Day's successful landings, Sergeant William Hartley stood before a review board bearing little resemblance to the tribunal that had banned his device 5 months earlier. The Normandy beaches had been secured at far lower cost than projected. Casualty rates for bunker assault had dropped by 73%. Allied forces were advancing inland against fortifications that German engineers had considered impenetrable. The statistics told the story more eloquently than words. 247 Regelbau bunkers neutralized using Hartley pattern-shaped charges. Estimated 4,400 British lives saved through reduced exposure time during demolition operations. Manufacturing cost, $4 per device compared to $140 for conventional demolition charges. Production time, 90 minutes versus 6 weeks for standard munitions. Major General Harold Montgomery, now coordinating Allied engineering operations, addressed the board with characteristic directness. "Gentlemen, institutional conservatism nearly cost us the invasion. Sergeant Hartley violated direct orders, risked court-martial, and quite possibly saved Operation Overlord." The room held officers from every service branch, their expressions ranging from grudging admiration to barely concealed embarrassment. Colonel Pemberton sat in the back row, silent and diminished. Hartley's innovation had triggered cascading consequences throughout military engineering doctrine. The shape charge principle was now being applied to anti-tank weapons, naval demolitions, and mine clearance. What began as improvisation in a cold workshop had transformed modern warfare's fundamental assumptions about fortification vulnerability. But perhaps more significantly, the T-10 bomb had challenged Britain's rigid class hierarchies. A working-class Mancunian with no university credentials had out-engineered Oxbridge-educated officers, proving that innovation emerged from practical experience rather than academic pedigree. The lesson was uncomfortable for an establishment built on centuries of class distinction. "You are hereby awarded the Military Medal for exceptional bravery and technical innovation," Montgomery announced, pinning the decoration to Hartley's uniform. "Though frankly, Sergeant, you deserve rather more than a medal for this." After the ceremony, Hartley returned to the workshop where it had all begun. Private Beckett, now promoted to corporal, was training new demolition specialists in shape charge manufacture. The T-10s, once objects of mockery, sat on workbenches beside copper sheeting and explosive compounds, their cheerful labels testament to British improvisation. "They're calling it the Hartley charge now," Beckett mentioned. "Proper official designation, though some of the lads still call them T-10 bombs out of respect." Hartley picked up one of the devices, feeling its familiar weight. The war would continue for another year, but the Atlantic Wall had been broken. German confidence in concrete invulnerability was shattered. Allied forces advanced, knowing that fortifications could be defeated quickly, efficiently, with weapons manufactured from civilian materials. The legacy extended beyond immediate military applications. After the war, shape-charged technology would revolutionize mining, demolition, and space exploration. But in June 1944, it meant something simpler and more profound. Soldiers returned home alive because a Manchester machinist had refused to accept that established methods were the only methods. Lieutenant Ashford, who'd led the Calais assault, visited the workshop that evening. "We're forming a specialized demolitions unit. Fast assault, shape charges, unconventional tactics. I'm requesting you as senior NCO instructor." Hartley considered the offer. The war's end was visible now, distant but inevitable. Beyond military service, Britain would need rebuilding. Factories, infrastructure, homes destroyed by bombing. The same practical engineering that had defeated bunkers could reconstruct a nation. "After this is finished," he said finally, "I'm returning to Manchester. There's rebuilding work to do. Bridges, buildings, all the things bombs destroyed. Seems fitting to use explosives for construction instead of destruction." Ashford nodded, understanding. "The Hartley charge will outlive all of us. Every military in the world will study it. But you'll be remembered as the man who saved thousands of lives by refusing to follow orders that made no sense." The evening sun slanted through workshop windows, illuminating rows of T-10 charges awaiting deployment. Hartley thought of the 43 men who died before his device was accepted, each name now inscribed on the memorial wall outside headquarters. Their deaths hadn't been meaningless. They'd provided the evidence that forced institutional change, but they shouldn't have been necessary. The real lesson of the T-10 bomb wasn't technological. It was about institutions that valued conformity over innovation, credentials over competence, tradition over effectiveness. The British military had learned expensively that survival required listening to voices from outside the established hierarchy. On June 6, 1944, when Allied forces stormed Normandy beaches, demolition teams carried Hartley charges in their assault packs. German bunkers that should have slaughtered thousands were neutralized in minutes. The invasion succeeded, in no small part, because a working-class engineer had trusted his calculations over institutional authority. Years later, when military historians analyzed Operation Overlord, they would identify the shaped charge breakthrough as one of 3 critical technological advantages that enabled success. The other 2, ultra code breaking and radar, received immediate recognition and official support. Hartley's innovation required defying direct orders, risking imprisonment, and manufacturing explosives in secret workshops during blackouts. But that perhaps was quintessentially British, the greatest innovations emerging not from official laboratories, but from garden sheds, garage workshops, and cold motor pool buildings, where practical men solved problems through stubborn determination and cups of strong tea. The T-10 bomb was never formally banned again. It became standard issue equipment, manufactured in official facilities, distributed throughout Allied forces. But every device bore a small stamp on its base, a Typhoon T-10 insignia, permanent reminder that victory sometimes required brewing solutions from unexpected ingredients. If you found William Hartley's story of British ingenuity and determination compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more untold histories from the Second World War. We explore the overlooked innovations, unsung heroes, and remarkable acts of courage that shaped the conflict's outcome. What other stories of wartime innovation should we cover? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your suggestions help us uncover history's hidden chapters. Ring the notification bell to ensure you never miss our weekly explorations of Britain's finest hours.